I was finishing paperwork at my kitchen table when my phone lit up with my sister's name. Jade didn't call often. When she did, it usually meant she needed something handled quickly and without questions. I let it ring twice, just long enough to brace myself, then answered. She didn't waste time. She told me she had to leave town for a few days. Something about meetings tied to Mom's care paperwork that couldn't be pushed. Her voice was calm, efficient, the same tone she used when she wanted a decision to sound smaller than it was. Then she said the part that mattered. She needed me to stay at the house and watch Mom. I stared at the stack of forms in front of me, already knowing I was going to say yes. I always did. Jade had been the one living nearby. She was the one who'd been there when Mom fell, when the hospital calls started, when the doctor stopped using words like recovery and switched to phrases that sounded final. I was the one who joined the army at 18 and learned how to live out of a duffel bag. Being away had been my choice. This was the price that came with it. Jade reminded me that Mom was in a coma. She said it like it was a convenience, not a tragedy. She won't know you're there, she added almost gently. She just needs someone in the house in case something happens. You won't have to do much. That should have bothered me. Instead, I heard relief in her voice, and that did something to me. I told her I could take a few days of leave. I told her I'd be there that evening. When I hung up, I sat there longer than I meant to. I'd spent most of my adult life learning how to make fast decisions. This one hadn't felt fast. It felt inevitable. The drive to Hawthorne Ridge took just under 2 hours. The closer I got, the quieter the roads became. Mom's house sat at the end of a short cul-de-sac, the kind where everyone knew everyone else's dog, but still pretended not to notice when an ambulance showed up. The place looked exactly the same as it always had. White siding, trimmed hedges, a porch light that stayed on all night, whether anyone needed it or not. Jade was waiting when I pulled in. She hugged me quickly, stiffly, like we were co-workers passing in a hallway. Inside, the house smelled faintly of antiseptic layered over old furniture and lemon cleaner. Medical equipment took up most of the living room now. A hospital bed sat where Mom's recliner used to be. Monitors hummed softly, steady, and impersonal. Mom lay still beneath thin blankets, her chest rising and falling in shallow, measured movements. Her eyes were closed. Her face looked smaller than I remembered, pulled tight by time, and something heavier. I stood there longer than I realized, waiting for a reaction that didn't come. Jade watched me from the doorway. She hasn't shown any awareness in months, she said. Doctors say it's unlikely she will. I nodded because nodding was easier than arguing with words I didn't know how to challenge. Jade launched into instructions. Medications were laid out in labeled containers. A nurse from an in-home agency came twice a day. Everything important was written down in a binder on the kitchen counter. She said it all the way someone recites a grocery list, quick and practiced. I noticed what she didn't say. She didn't mention Mom's doctors by name. She didn't mention what the medications were just when they were given. She didn't ask how I was doing or whether I needed help staying overnight. It was all logistics. I told myself that was stress talking. Cal came through the room with his phone pressed to his ear, nodding at something I couldn't hear. He barely acknowledged me, just lifted his hand in a half wave and disappeared down the hall. I knew enough about Cal to know he hated hospitals and anything that made him feel trapped. The fact that he was already talking about leaving told me this wasn't just Jade's trip. Jade checked her watch. We should get going, she said. I'll text you if you need anything. I asked her for the number of Mom's primary doctor. She hesitated, then waved toward the binder. It's all in there. The agency handles communication. That answer didn't sit right, but I didn't push it. I told myself this wasn't my lane. I wasn't the one who'd been managing this. I was just filling in. They left not long after that, suitcases rolling softly across the floor. Jade paused at the door and looked back at me. Thank you, she said. This means a lot. The door closed behind them with a click that felt louder than it should have. The house settled into a kind of silence that pressed in from all sides. I stood there, suddenly aware of how alone I was with someone who couldn't tell me if she even knew I existed. I walked through the house, slowly checking rooms out of habit. The kitchen was spotless, almost aggressively so. The binder sat open on the counter, tabs neatly labeled. Everything looked organized, too organized. Back in the living room, I adjusted the blanket near Mom's shoulder. Her skin felt cool and dry. I watched the monitor for a moment, letting the rhythm calm me. This was familiar territory. Machines didn't lie. They did what they were programmed to do. Still, something nagged at me. The equipment looked standard, but the setup felt off. The IV line ran from the pole to Mom's arm, but the drip rate didn't match the schedule written in the binder. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't trained to notice patterns. I leaned closer, tracing the line with my eyes. A clamp sat partially closed, not enough to stop the flow completely, just enough to slow it. My first thought was that the nurse had adjusted it and forgotten to open it again. My second thought was that it shouldn't have been like that at all. I reached out and adjusted the clamp, opening it just a fraction. The fluid began to move more steadily. I told myself I was overthinking. Years of military training had a way of turning small details into potential problems. That didn't mean there was actually a problem. I straightened up and took a step back. That's when Mom's fingers twitched. At first I thought it was a reflex. Muscles do strange things when bodies lie still long enough. Then her breathing changed. Not the steady mechanical rhythm I'd been watching, but something uneven, searching. I leaned in again, my heart picking up speed despite my best efforts to stay calm. Her eyelids fluttered just once, then again. For a second I couldn't move. I'd spent months accepting the idea that she was gone in every way that mattered. Watching that assumption crack felt like the floor shifting beneath me. Her eyes opened. They weren't unfocused. They weren't empty. They locked onto my face with a clarity that made my stomach drop. Her mouth moved, lips dry and trembling, and she drew in a breath that sounded like it hurt. I froze, torn between calling for help and the instinct to listen. She didn't have much strength, and whatever she was trying to say mattered enough that she was forcing it out anyway. "Don't call your sister," she whispered, each word scraping out slowly. "Call 911 and hide your phone." Her eyes closed again, her body sinking back into stillness, as if nothing had happened at all. The monitor returned to its steady pattern. The room went quiet in a way that felt wrong, like it was pretending nothing had changed. My hand stayed frozen in the air long after her eyes closed, like if I moved too fast, I'd undo what I'd just seen. The monitor kept beeping, steady and uncaring. Whatever had happened wasn't happening anymore, at least not in a way the machines could measure. I looked at Mom's face again, peaceful, still, exactly how Jade had described her. I checked the IV line once more, slower this time. The fluid was flowing normally now. I told myself that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Stress does that. Long drives, guilt, empty houses. I'd seen soldiers swear they heard voices in quiet rooms. Brains hate silence. But I hadn't imagined the words. I stepped back and forced myself to breathe the way I'd been trained to when things started spinning. In through the nose, out through the mouth. No panic, no sudden moves. Whatever was going on here, panicking wouldn't help Mom, and it wouldn't help me. The binder on the counter caught my eye again. I picked it up and carried it to the table, flipping through the tabs. Medication schedule, nurse visits, emergency contacts. Everything looked clean, almost too clean, like it had been typed up by someone who expected it to be read closely. I scanned the medication list. Names, dosages, times. Some of them were familiar, others weren't. I pulled out my phone and searched one of the unfamiliar drug names. Sedative, stronger than I expected. I checked the dosage listed in the binder against what was standard. It was high, but not so high it would raise alarms, just enough to keep someone down. I closed the browser and locked my phone without calling anyone. Mom's voice echoed in my head, hoarse but clear. "Hide your phone." I didn't like that part. People who are wrong don't usually give good advice. The house creaked softly as I walked down the hallway. I checked the guest room Jade had set up for me. Fresh sheets, folded towels, a glass of water on the nightstand, like I was checking into a hotel, instead of watching my mother fade away. On the dresser sat a second binder, thinner than the one in the kitchen. Financial documents, bank statements, insurance paperwork. I flipped through it, standing up, scanning numbers without really reading them. Transfers caught my attention, small ones at first, then larger. The dates lined up with Mom's accident, with her move back into the house. Everything had a note attached. Care expenses, equipment upgrades, agency fees. I wasn't a finance expert, but I knew enough to spot a pattern. Money was moving out faster than it should have been. I put the binder back exactly where I'd found it. If I was going to look into this, I needed to do it quietly. Jade had trusted me to stay here. That trust was already cracking, but it was still useful. A car passed outside, headlights sweeping briefly across the living room wall. The normal world kept moving while I stood in a house that suddenly felt staged. I checked the time, late afternoon. The nurse was scheduled to come by in about an hour. I went back to Mom's bedside and pulled up a chair. If she woke again, I wanted to be there. I kept my voice low and steady, the way you talk to someone who might be listening, even if they can't answer. "I'm here," I said. "You're not alone." She didn't move. I watched her breathing, counting without meaning to. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Jade. "Just checking in. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Everything okay felt like a loaded question now. I typed back something safe. "She's resting, all quiet here." 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. Finally, a reply. "Good, let me know if you need anything." I slid the phone into the drawer of the side table instead of my pocket. "Hide your phone." I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but I was done ignoring it. The knock at the door came right on schedule. I opened it to find a woman in her early 50s, wearing scrubs and a tired smile. She introduced herself as Paige, the visiting nurse. Her eyes went straight to the equipment as she stepped inside, assessing the room with practiced ease. "How's she been today?" Paige asked quietly. "Stable," I said. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Paige checked Mom's vitals, adjusted her pillows, made notes on a tablet. She frowned slightly at the IV, then smoothed her expression. "Has anyone adjusted her meds since this morning?" "Not that I know of," I said. She nodded, but the frown came back smaller this time. "Sometimes things shift," she said. "It happens." I watched her closely, looking for signs of complicity or indifference. I saw neither. Just routine and a hint of concern she didn't seem ready to voice. When she finished, she reminded me of the next visit and headed for the door. As she left, she paused. "If anything changes, even small things, call," she said. "Day or night, I will," I said, meaning it more than she knew. When the door closed again, the house felt heavier than before. I sat back down at the table and opened the binder once more, this time, reading everything carefully. Dates, times, dosages. Patterns emerged the longer I looked. The medication schedule tightened around the hours Jade was home. When she wasn't, things shifted just enough to be noticed by someone paying attention. I heard a soft sound behind me and turned. Mom's eyes were open again, just barely. This time, she didn't try to speak. She looked at me, then flicked her gaze toward the hallway, toward the drawer where my phone was hidden. I stood up slowly and moved closer. "I'm right here," I said again. Her lips moved, no sound coming out. I leaned in close enough to hear her breath. "They think you won't see," she whispered. "They think you won't question," who I asked, keeping my voice even. Her eyes slid shut before she could answer. Her breathing evened out, the moment passing like it had never existed. I stayed there, my mind racing, but my body still. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a dying woman grasping at ghosts. This was timing. Controlled, deliberate, terrifying timing. I looked around the room again, seeing it differently now. The neatness, the labels, the calm explanations. Jade hadn't just asked me to do her a favor. She'd placed me exactly where she needed me. I pulled the drawer open just enough to check my phone. No missed calls, no new messages. Outside, the sky was starting to darken, the day sliding quietly toward evening. I closed the drawer again and went back to my chair, sitting close enough to feel Mom's presence without touching her. Whatever was happening in this house wasn't over. It was ongoing, methodical, and comfortable with silence. And as I watched the light fade from the windows, one thing settled into place with a clarity I couldn't shake. This wasn't about keeping Mom comfortable. It was about control. I stood there longer than made sense, listening to the house breathe around us. The monitors hummed. The refrigerator clicked on in the kitchen. Somewhere down the block, a lawn sprinkler started up, cheerful and oblivious. None of it lined up with what had just happened. I leaned in again and checked Mom's pulse the old-fashioned way, 2 fingers at her wrist. It was steady, her skin was warm. Not feverish, not cold. Alive in a way I hadn't allowed myself to consider since the accident. I adjusted the blanket and watched her face, waiting for another sign, another word. Anything that would prove I hadn't crossed into some stress-induced hallucination. Nothing. I pushed the chair back quietly and went to the kitchen. The binder was still open where I'd left it. I flipped to the emergency protocol page. Bolded instructions. Call the agency. Call the nurse. Call 911 only if there was a sudden medical crisis. Nothing about sudden consciousness. Nothing about whispered warnings. I poured myself a glass of water and took a slow sip. My hand was steady. That surprised me. I'd trained myself to stay calm in loud places. Dangerous places, places where panic got people hurt. I hadn't trained for this. This was quiet. This was personal. This was my mother telling me not to trust my sister. I set the glass down and checked the trash. The bag was nearly empty, recently changed. Too recently. I pulled it out and opened it anyway. Medication packaging. Cleanly cut labels peeled off. Whoever had done it hadn't wanted the names lying around. I replaced the bag and washed my hands, scrubbing longer than necessary. My phone buzzed in the drawer. I ignored it. If Jade needed something, she'd call again. Or Cal would. Or both. Back in the living room, I pulled the chair closer to Mom's bed and sat where she could see me if she opened her eyes again. I kept my voice low and steady, the way I'd learned to talk to people who needed reassurance more than answers. "I'm here," I said again. "I'm not going anywhere." Her eyelids fluttered barely, not opening, just enough to tell me she could hear. That alone shifted something deep in my chest. Hearing wasn't nothing. Hearing meant awareness. Awareness meant intent. I thought about Jade's tone on the phone, calm, efficient. The way she'd said Mom wouldn't know I was there. That line didn't sit right anymore. It sounded like confidence, or like planning. I stood and walked the perimeter of the room, cataloging details the way I would any unfamiliar space. Power outlets, window locks, the position of the bed in relation to the door. The IV pole stood close enough that someone could reach it without stepping into view from the hallway. That wasn't an accident. That was convenience. I crouched and checked the underside of the bed. Nothing hidden, no spare syringes, no extra supplies. Whoever was managing this wasn't sloppy. They didn't leave tools lying around. My phone buzzed again. This time I opened the drawer just enough to read the screen. A missed call from Cal. No message. That was new. Cal didn't call me unless he needed something signed or smoothed over. I slid the phone back and closed the drawer. Hide your phone. The words made more sense now. Not because Mom knew what was happening, but because she knew enough to be afraid. I heard her breathe change again and leaned in. Her eyes opened slower this time, like it took effort. She looked at me, then at the IV line, then back at me. "They watch the times," she whispered. "They listen," who I asked, keeping my face neutral. She swallowed hard. "Jade," she said. "And him. Cal." She didn't have to say his name. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. "What do they do?" Her fingers twitched against the sheet, frustrated. "Sleep," she said. "They make me sleep. If I move, it gets worse." When I asked, her eyes flicked toward the window, toward the street. "When you're not here." That landed hard. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed the shape of what I'd been circling since I arrived. The timing, Jade leaving town, asking me to stay, making sure I was here to see nothing happen. I leaned closer, my mouth near her ear. "You're safe right now," I said. "I won't let anyone touch you." Her eyes held mine sharp despite the drugs weighing her down. "They need you," she whispered. "You're proof. Proof of what I asked." Her eyelids fluttered again, fighting. That I didn't wake up. Then they closed and her breathing settled back into its shallow rhythm. The moment passed, leaving my heart pounding and my thoughts lining up in a way I didn't like. I stood slowly and paced the room, careful not to make noise. Proof. That word echoed louder than anything else she'd said. Proof meant witnesses. Proof meant documentation. Proof meant someone planning ahead. I went back to the financial binder in the guest room, this time sitting down and reading every page. Transfers, authorizations, a power of attorney form dated 3 weeks after Mom's accident. The signature looked like hers at first glance. The longer I stared, the less it matched the handwriting I remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists. I took photos with my phone, angling it so the screen wouldn't reflect in the window. No flash. Quiet. Efficient. I emailed them to myself using a subject line that wouldn't draw attention if someone glanced at my inbox. Back in the living room, I checked the medication tray again. One syringe sat capped and ready for the evening dose. Clear liquid, no label, no markings. I didn't touch it, not yet. Moving it would leave evidence. Evidence worked both ways. The front of the house grew darker as the sun dropped. Streetlights flicked on, one by one. From the couch, the place looked peaceful. Anyone walking by would see a tidy home and a woman sitting quietly beside her sick mother. Nothing alarming, nothing worth noticing. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text. "Jade, how's Mom doing?" I typed back slowly. "Same as before, resting. No changes." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A moment later, another message. "Good, we'll be back tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow afternoon, not tonight, not rushing. That told me more than she probably meant to. Whatever they were doing, they were comfortable letting it continue one more night. I locked the phone and slid it back into the drawer. Then I pulled my chair closer to Mom's bed and sat down close enough that if she opened her eyes again, she'd see me first. The house stayed quiet, too quiet. And in that quiet, one thing became painfully clear. The moment Jade walked out the door, the rules in this house changed. I shifted closer to the bed and rested my forearm on the rail, keeping my movements slow and ordinary. The last thing I wanted was to startle her back into silence. Her breathing stayed shallow, but even the kind you could mistake for sleep if you weren't listening for it. Her eyes opened again, a fraction wider this time. She didn't look confused. She looked tired in a way that came from fighting something invisible and losing ground inch by inch. "You okay?" I asked quietly. She nodded once. "Barely, hurts," she whispered. Everywhere she said, then took a shallow breath and steadied herself. But mostly here. Her eyes flicked to her head, then to the eye. I glanced at the line, then back at her. "What are they giving you?" she swallowed. "They say it helps me rest." "That's not an answer." Her mouth twitched almost a smile. "That's what Jade says." I felt something sharp and familiar settle behind my ribs. Not panic, not fear, anger, but the controlled kind. The kind that makes you pay attention. "When did this start?" I asked. She closed her eyes for a second, gathering strength. "After the hospital," she said. "When I started waking up more, asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About money," she said. "About papers I didn't remember signing. About why Cal needed access to my accounts." I kept my face neutral. Inside pieces slid into place. And then I slept," she said. "A lot." Her eyes opened again, and this time she held my gaze. "I could hear them," she said. "Sometimes, not always. Jade talks when she thinks I can't hear. Cal talks when he thinks it doesn't matter." "What did they say?" She hesitated, then shook her head slightly. "Not everything. It comes and goes. I don't always know what day it is, but I know when they're afraid." "Afraid of what?" Her fingers curled weakly into the blanket. "Of me waking up." I let that sit for a moment. Machines hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. "They don't think I can tell the difference anymore," she went on. "They think I don't remember what my signature looks like, or what I own." I leaned closer. "Do you remember enough?" she said. "Enough to know what isn't right." I thought about the power of attorney form I'd photographed. The smooth confidence of the typed language. The signature that tried too hard to look like hers. "Did you give them permission to do any of this?" "So," she said without hesitation. "Never." Her voice was stronger now, steadier. The effort it took was obvious. She was pushing through something heavy, something designed to keep her down. That told me more than any document ever could. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw something like regret. "I tried," she said, "once. The nurse came early. I squeezed her hand, tried to speak. Jade laughed it off, said it was a reflex. The nurse believed her. That landed harder than I expected. "Which nurse?" She shook her head. "Not the one today, a different one. They don't stay long." I nodded. "Agency turnover. Red flag number 1. "What about your doctor?" Her lips pressed together. "I haven't seen him in person since I left the hospital." That was red flag number 2. I straightened slowly, keeping my voice calm. "You said they need me. Why?" She looked toward the hallway, then back at me. "Because you're respectable," she said. "You wear a uniform. You don't lie. When someone asks if I ever woke up, you'll say no. Because that's what you were told." The room felt smaller all of a sudden. "They told you that, Tot?" She nodded. "Jade said it last week. She said having you here would make things easier. Cleaner, like paperwork. Like closing a file." I took a slow breath through my nose. "I won't lie for them." Her eyes searched my face, measuring. "They think you will," she said. "They think you'll believe them. I don't." A faint sound escaped her, something between a laugh and a sigh. "Good," she said. "Then maybe I'm not as stuck as they think." I glanced at the syringe waiting on the tray across the room. Evening dose according to the schedule. The time printed on the label was coming up fast. "What happens when they give you the next dose?" She didn't answer right away. Her jaw tightened. "I disappear," she said finally. "Sometimes for hours, sometimes longer. Do you stop breathing?" She shook her head. Not yet. I didn't like the way that sounded, but I didn't show it. Do they ever check on you after? Only to write things down, she said. They don't talk to me then. I followed her gaze again this time, noticing how the bed was positioned. Easy access from the hallway, easy access from the kitchen, no cameras, no witnesses. You said they listen, I said. To what phones, she whispered. Rooms. They're careful. I thought about my phone in the drawer. Okay, I said. Then we keep this quiet. Her eyes widened slightly. You believe me, yes. She exhaled a long breath she'd been holding in for weeks. Her eyelids fluttered, the effort catching up with her. I placed my hand lightly on her arm, not squeezing, just grounding her. You don't need to explain everything, I said. Not all at once. Her eyes stayed open a moment longer. There's something else, she said. What? She swallowed hard. They argue about timing. My stomach tightened. Timing for what? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. For when I stop. The words sat between us heavy and exact. I didn't rush to fill the silence. Silence was useful. Silence made people underestimate you. I stood and checked the clock. 10 minutes until the scheduled dose. I looked back at her. I'm not letting that happen. She studied my face, then nodded satisfied. They won't expect you to question it, she said. That's your advantage. I glanced toward the hallway again, toward the drawer with my phone toward the front door. Jade had walked out of with such confidence. Advantage was a word I understood. I pulled the chair back into place and sat where I could watch both Mom and the medication tray without making it obvious. My posture was relaxed, ordinary. Anyone walking in would see exactly what they expected to see. Mom's eyes closed again, her breathing settling. I didn't try to wake her. I didn't touch the syringe. I didn't call anyone. I just stayed where I was, listening to the house, counting the seconds, and letting one truth sink in fully. My mother wasn't unconscious. She was being silenced. I didn't move when the clock clicked over to the hour. I stayed where I was, hands relaxed on my knees, eyes on the tray, like I'd been doing this all day. The syringe sat there, clear and innocent looking, the kind of thing people trust without thinking. That was the point. I waited until Mom's breathing evened out again before standing. I picked up the binder and flipped to the care log. Dates, times, initials, Jade's handwriting showed up everywhere, neat and consistent, like she'd practiced being dependable. There were blank lines too, spaces meant for someone else to fill in. Someone like me. The pen lay right beside the binder, uncapped. I left it there. I checked the time again and walked to the kitchen, moving slowly enough that if someone were listening, nothing would sound unusual. I poured another glass of water and leaned against the counter, staring at the refrigerator. Photos were taped to it with magnets. Old birthdays. A faded picture of me in uniform, Jade standing beside Mom, arm slung around her shoulders like a claim. That photo hadn't been there the last time I visited. My phone vibrated in the drawer. I didn't open it right away. I took a sip of water and let my pulse settle. When I finally checked, there were 2 new messages. Cal, just checking in. Everything good, Jade right after. Did you give her the evening dose yet? There it was, not how's Mom doing, not is everything okay. Timing, I typed back with one hand. About to. She's resting. The response came fast. Make sure it's on schedule. Consistency matters. Consistency matters. Not safety, not comfort, consistency. That word landed like a stamp on a document. I slid the phone back and walked into the living room. The syringe was still there. I picked it up and turned it in my fingers. Careful not to touch the plunger. Clear liquid, no label, no prescription info, just trust and habit. I didn't administer it. I didn't move it either. I set it back exactly where it had been and sat down again this time, with a clearer picture of the role I'd been handed. They hadn't just needed someone in the house. They needed me specifically. Someone with a reputation, someone who wouldn't be questioned later, someone who could say with a straight face and a clean record that nothing unusual had happened, that Mom never woke up, that she was peaceful. I looked at the log again. The next line waited patiently. I thought about how Jade had said having me here would make things easier, cleaner. I thought about how often she'd mentioned my job over the years, usually when she wanted something smoothed over or taken seriously. I'd always assumed she was proud. Now I wasn't so sure. Mom stirred a small movement of her hand against the sheet. I leaned in. Her eyes stayed closed, but her fingers brushed my wrist, light and deliberate. A question without words. I know, I said quietly. I see it. Her fingers tightened just a fraction, then relaxed. I stayed there until the minute hand moved past the scheduled dose time. Then another, no alarms went off, no one burst through the door. The house stayed quiet like it was holding its breath. My phone buzzed again. Jade, did you give it to her? I answered honestly without giving anything away. She's still asleep. I'm sitting with her. There was a pause this time, longer than before. Then, okay, don't let it get too late. Too late for what I didn't ask. Questions make people defensive. Silence makes them careless. I stood and went back to the guest room, opening the financial binder again. This time I read the fine print. Account numbers, authorization language. Cal's name appeared more often than I expected. Not as a primary holder, but as an approved contact. Enough access to move things around without triggering alerts if no one was watching closely. I took more photos. Slow, methodical. I noted dates in my head, connecting them to Mom's hospital stay, to the day Jade told me she'd been moved home for comfort care. Comfort for who exactly? I slid the binder back into place and returned to the living room. Mom's breathing had changed again, shallower this time. I checked her vitals manually, then glanced at the monitor. Everything read within acceptable ranges. Acceptable didn't mean safe. It meant deniable. I pulled the chair closer and sat down, positioning myself so my body blocked the view of the medication tray from the hallway. If someone walked in, they'd see a concerned daughter keeping vigil. Nothing more. The front door didn't open. No footsteps. No voices. Just the quiet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Jade. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, I said, keeping my tone light. Did you give her the dose? Jade asked, skipping any greeting. She's sleeping, I said. Her vitals are steady. I didn't want to disturb her. There was a brief silence. I could picture her face calculating. The schedule is important, she said. The nurse will notice if things are off. I'm here, I said. If anything changes, I'll handle it. Another pause. Then she sighed like I was being difficult without meaning to be. Just make sure everything's documented, she said. We don't want confusion later. Later, that word had weight now. I'll take care of it, I said. When I hung up, I didn't feel relief. I felt clarity. This wasn't improvisation on their part. It was a process, a system that relied on predictability and silence. Mom's eyes opened again, just a sliver. I leaned in close. They want me to sign, I whispered. Her lips moved, no sound coming out this time. She squeezed my fingers weakly. I won't, I said. Her eyes stayed on mine, sharp despite everything. Trust. Real trust, not the kind written into a form. I checked the log one more time and closed the binder without touching the pen. I didn't write anything false. I didn't write anything true either. I left it blank, a quiet problem waiting to be noticed. Outside, a car passed, tires hissing on pavement. Somewhere in the house, the air system kicked on, circulating the same air through every room. I stayed seated, counting breaths, counting minutes, letting my presence disrupt their pattern just enough to matter. They thought they'd left me here to watch over someone who couldn't speak. What they'd actually done was put me in the one place where the story they planned depended entirely on my silence. And I wasn't silent anymore. I shifted my chair a few inches closer to the bed, not because Mom needed it, but because I needed a better angle on the room. Habit. When things didn't add up, you changed your position and watched again. Same space, different view. The first rule I followed was simple: don't announce what you know. People get sloppy when they think they're unseen, not when they think they're challenged. So I kept my face neutral, my movements ordinary, my voice low and unremarkable. Anyone listening would hear nothing more than a tired daughter sitting vigil. I pulled a legal pad from my bag and wrote at the top, times. No names, no accusations, just facts. I wrote down when Mom's breathing changed, when her eyes opened, when the IV flow slowed, when my phone buzzed. I didn't editorialize. I didn't guess. I logged. I checked the medication tray again. The syringe was still there, same position, same clear liquid, no label. I wrote the time next to it and circled it once. Then I checked the trash again this time. Pulling the bag out far enough to see the bottom, more packaging, same clean cuts, no pharmacy labels. I added another note. When the house is quiet, small sounds stand out. The refrigerator's hum wasn't constant. It cycled every few minutes. The air vent in the hallway whistled softly when the system kicked on. The IV pump clicked at regular intervals. I learned the rhythm. Once you know, the baseline deviations are obvious. My phone vibrated in the drawer. I let it sit. Timing mattered. When I finally opened it, there was a missed call from the agency number listed in the binder. No voicemail. That was odd. If there was a concern, they usually left a message. I dialed back, keeping my voice casual. "This is Tessa. I saw a missed call." A woman answered, cheerful but rushed. "Oh yes, just checking in. Everything okay there?" "Yes," I said. "Nurse Paige was here earlier." A pause. "Good. She noted some variations." "Nothing serious?" "Variations in what I asked." "Vitals fluctuate," the woman said quickly. "Especially in patients like your mother." "Patients like my mother," I repeated, letting the silence stretch. "Well," she said, filling it, "long-term care. It's expected." I thanked her and hung up. I wrote down the time of the call and the phrase she'd used. "Patients like your mother." Vague language covered a lot of ground. I went back to Mom and sat where she could see me if she opened her eyes. She did briefly, and her gaze went straight to my face. Not to the ceiling, not to the wall. Me. "I'm paying attention," I said quietly. Her fingers brushed the sheet, a faint acknowledgement. I stood and walked the hallway again, checking doors, windows, locks. Everything was secured. Not locked down, but orderly, the kind of order that assumed cooperation. I thought about how Jade had set this up. The binder, the logs, the routines. It wasn't just care, it was documentation. A paper trail that told one clean story. I stopped in the guest room and opened my laptop, connecting to the house Wi-Fi. The network name was something bland and forgettable. I checked the router history. Devices connected. Disconnected. A tablet I didn't recognize had logged in earlier in the day, then dropped off. I wrote that down too. Back in the living room, I watched the clock. The evening dose time was long past. No one had come. No one had called again. That told me they were waiting. Watching from a distance. Letting the schedule bend just enough to see what I'd do. I picked up the pen and flipped open the care log. The blank line stared back at me. Time, initials, notes. I didn't fill it in. Instead, I wrote the time in my legal pad again and added a note: dose present, not administered, no initials. My phone buzzed. Jade again. Her message was short. "Please tell me you didn't skip it." I typed back carefully. "I'm monitoring her. Vitals are stable." 3 dots appeared, vanished, reappeared. Then, "This isn't about judgment, it's about protocol." Protocol. The word made me smile just a little. Protocol was something I understood better than she ever would. I stood and moved the medication tray a few inches farther from the bed. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough that it wouldn't be an immediate reach from the hallway. If someone came in quietly, they'd have to step fully into the room to get it. Visibility matters. Mom's breathing hitched, then steadied. I leaned in. "I'm here," I said again. "No one's touching you." Her eyes opened a fraction. "They'll be mad," she whispered. "Let them," I said. She closed her eyes, trusting me with the rest. The knock at the door came late, well after dark. 2 sharp taps, then a pause. I checked the clock and stood smoothing my shirt like I'd just gotten up from the couch. When I opened the door, a different nurse stood there, younger than Paige, clipboard clutched to her chest. "I'm here to check on Marjorie Ward," she said, reading from the paper. I nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." She moved straight for the living room, eyes scanning the equipment. "Any changes?" she asked. "Some," I said. "I noted them." She glanced at the log. The blank line caught her attention immediately. "This isn't filled out. I didn't administer the dose," I said calmly. "I wasn't comfortable with it." Her eyes flicked up, startled. "That's not your call." "I'm the one sitting here," I said. "And I'm the one responsible if something goes wrong." She hesitated, then checked the monitor herself. "Vitals are stable," she said, more to reassure herself than me. "Exactly," I said. She made a note on her clipboard, her pen pressing harder than necessary. "I'll report this," she said. "Please do," I said. When she left, the house felt different. Not quieter, tenser. I wrote down her name and the time she'd arrived. Then I sat back down, my posture relaxed. My attention sharp. My phone buzzed again, this time with a longer message from Jade. "We need to talk when we get back. This can't happen again." I read it once and slid the phone back into the drawer. I looked at Mom, then at the door, then at the log that remained unfilled. The pattern had shifted. Not enough to tip them off completely, but enough to force adjustments. Adjustments create mistakes. I settled in pen, resting on the pad, eyes moving between the clock, the IV, and my mother's face. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was watching. I didn't sleep. I rested my eyes in short stretches, the way you do when you can't afford to miss anything. The house had a rhythm now, and I knew when something didn't fit it. Around 3 in the morning, the air system cycled on twice in quick succession. At 4, a car slowed in front of the house, then moved on. By sunrise, I'd logged more times than I cared to count. Mom stirred just after 6. Her eyes opened long enough to find me. I nodded once, a quiet check-in. She closed them again, breathing shallow but steady. I took the opportunity to move. I returned to the guest room and opened the financial binder again this time. With the patience that comes from being awake too long, I stopped skimming and started reading. The language was careful, clinical. Phrases like best interest and continuity of care appeared often, always near places where signatures mattered. The power of attorney form sat near the back, durable, broad, effective immediately. Jade was listed as primary, Cal as secondary. I compared the signature to the one on Mom's old Christmas cards I'd photographed from the fridge. Same name, different pressure, different slant. Someone had practiced. Someone had tried to be convincing. I took more photos than checked the dates. The form had been notarized on a Tuesday afternoon. I remembered that day. Jade had told me Mom was completely unresponsive. She'd said it casually, like weather. I flipped to the bank statements. Transfers out, care expenses allegedly. Equipment rentals that didn't match what I saw in the living room. Agency fees that climbed month over month. Then a payment that didn't fit the pattern at all. A personal loan payoff. Cal's name appeared in the memo field disguised by initials. I sat back and let the chair creak, the sound too loud in the quiet room. This wasn't just about keeping Mom quiet. This was about moving money while no one could object. My phone buzzed in the drawer. I checked it. A message from Cal this time, longer than the others. Jade's upset, you're making things complicated. We just want what's best for her. What's best for her? I didn't reply. Back in the living room, Mom's eyes opened again. She watched me cross the room, then flicked her gaze toward the binder I was holding. I found papers, I said softly. Her jaw tightened. They moved money, she whispered. Didn't they? Yes. A flicker of something crossed her face. Relief, maybe, or validation. I told them no, she said. They said I didn't understand. I sat down close enough that she didn't have to strain to hear me. Do you remember signing anything? She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. They brought papers, she said. Jade held my hand. Cal talked. I said I was tired. And then I slept, she said. When I woke up, they said it was done. I felt my teeth grind together. They used that. Her eyes searched my face. I trusted her, she said, not as an excuse, just a fact. I know. I checked the time. Nurse Page would be back mid-morning. The other nurse's visit from the night before would have been reported by now. The agency would be calling Jade. Jade would be calling me. The phone buzzed again. Jade's name lit up the screen this time. I answered. We need to clear the air, she said, skipping pleasantries. You can't just decide to ignore the care plan. I'm not ignoring it, I said. I'm questioning it. A sharp exhale. That's not your role. Then why am I here? Silence. Then, because you're family. No, I said. Because you needed me to see nothing. Her voice hardened. You're tired. You're reading too much into things. I saw the power of attorney, I said. Another pause. Longer. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Defensive, but controlled. That was necessary. Necessary for who? For handling things, she said. Mom can't manage finances. Someone has to. Someone you chose, I said. She agreed, Jade said quickly. She understood. I looked at Mom. Her eyes open now, focused, listening. She didn't, I said. And you know it. Jade's voice dropped. Be careful, she said. You don't want to make accusations you can't back up. I'm not accusing, I said. I'm documenting. The line went dead. I slid the phone back into the drawer and turned to Mom. They're scared, I said. She closed her eyes, the corners of her mouth tightening. Good, she whispered. The doorbell rang an hour later. Nurse Page stood there, her expression serious. I need to talk to you, she said as soon as she stepped inside. We spoke quietly in the kitchen. She'd noticed inconsistencies. Dosages that didn't match responses. Documentation that looked too polished. She'd filed a report with Adult Protective Services the night before, flagged as concern, not accusation. She told me they'd asked her to keep observing. I'm glad you're here, she said. Something's not right. I agree, I said. She glanced toward the living room. Has she been responsive? Yes, I said. Intermittently. Page's eyes sharpened. That changes things. She checked Mom again more thoroughly this time, asking questions in a way that assumed answers might come. Mom didn't speak, but she squeezed Paige's hand when prompted. Paige noticed. She wrote it down. After Paige left, I sat with Mom again, the binder closed beside me, my legal pad filling up with facts instead of feelings. I thought about how Jade had always framed herself as the responsible one, the one who stayed, the one who sacrificed. It made sense now. Control wears a convincing mask. Mom's eyes opened again. She's angry, she whispered. Yes, I said. She won't stop, she added. I won't either. She studied my face, then nodded. Then listen, she said. When they argue, it's about timing. Cal wants it sooner. Jade wants it clean, sooner for what I asked, though I already knew. Her fingers curled into the sheet. For when I don't wake up at all. I let the words settle, then stood and moved the chair closer, placing myself squarely between her and the hallway. My posture was relaxed. My attention wasn't. Outside, the day went on like nothing was wrong. Inside, the story they'd been writing for months had started to come apart, one document at a time. The sound of tires on gravel pulled my attention toward the front window before I consciously decided to look. A familiar sedan rolled to a stop in the driveway, engine ticking as it cooled. I stayed seated, shoulders loose, hands resting on my thighs. Nothing about my posture suggested urgency. That mattered. The front door opened without a knock. Jade's voice floated in first, bright and practiced. We're back, footsteps followed. Cal came in behind her, eyes scanning the room the way people do when they're checking for changes they hope not to find. Jade stepped into the living room and stopped short when she saw where I was sitting, close to the bed, angled just enough to block a clean view of the medication tray. Hey, she said, forcing a smile. How's she been? Stable, I said. Jade nodded already. Moving closer to Mom, she brushed a hand over Mom's hair with exaggerated tenderness, then glanced at the monitor. See, she said to Cal. I told you she'd be fine. Cal's gaze flicked to the IV line, then to the binder on the table. Everything on schedule, he asked. I met his eyes. I kept notes. Jade straightened. You filled out the log. I wrote down what happened, I said. I didn't sign anything I didn't do. Her jaw tightened for half a second before she smoothed it out. We can talk about details later. Now's fine, I said. She laughed softly like I'd made a joke. You're tired. Let's not make this a thing. Cal cleared his throat. The nurse mentioned some confusion, he said. About medication timing. I asked questions, I said. That's all. Jade turned to face me fully now. The smile was gone. You don't need to ask questions, she said. You need to follow the plan. The plan, I repeated. Yes, she said. The care plan. The one the doctors agreed to. Which doctor? I asked. Her eyes flashed. Don't do this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I'm just trying to understand. Cal stepped closer, lowering his voice. Understanding isn't the issue, he said. Consistency is. I glanced at Mom. Her eyes were closed, but the tension in her face told me she was listening. Consistency matters when you're telling the truth, I said. Otherwise, it just makes the lie easier to repeat. Jade inhaled sharply. You're crossing a line. You drew it, I said. She looked away, then back, recalculating. Okay, she said. Let's reset. We appreciate you being here. But this is hard enough without extra stress. If you can't handle it, maybe you should go home. That would be convenient, I said. Cal's mouth tightened. Careful. Jade held up a hand. No, let her talk. I stood slowly and picked up the binder, opening it to the care log. You wanted this filled out, I said. But you wanted it filled out a certain way. That's not fair, Jade said. I didn't say it was, I said. I said it's what you wanted. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You don't know what you're implying. I know exactly what I'm implying, I said. You needed someone credible in this house, someone who could say she never woke up. Cal shifted uncomfortably. Jade's eyes locked on mine. You're being paranoid. Then explain the power of attorney, I said. The room went quiet. Cal looked at Jade. Jade didn't look at him. That was necessary, she said finally. Mom can't make decisions. She can. I said. She's been making them. You just didn't like them. Jade's composure cracked. You weren't here, she snapped. You didn't see what I dealt with. I gave up my life for this. You took control, I said. There's a difference. Cal stepped in, voice low and sharp. This conversation isn't productive. It's overdue, I said. Jade took a breath and forced her voice calm again. You're misunderstanding things because you're emotional. That's understandable, but you need to trust me. Trust works both ways, I said. She looked at Mom, then back at me. We need to give her the evening dose. I'm sitting with her, I said. That's not what I said, Jade replied. I said we need to give it to her. Cal moved toward the tray. I shifted just enough to block him without touching him. I'm not comfortable with that, I said. Jade's voice dropped. This isn't your call. It is while I'm here, I said. She stared at me, something cold settling into her expression. You're putting your career at risk, she said quietly. All it takes is one report. One note about erratic behavior, stress, poor judgment. I smiled, small and controlled. You should be careful with threats. I'm not threatening, she said. I'm warning. I looked at Cal. Is that what this is? He didn't answer. Mom's breathing hitched. I leaned closer to her, resting a hand on the bed rail. I'm here, I said softly. Jade exhaled, frustrated. Fine, she said. We'll wait. For what I asked. For things to calm down, she said. For you to think clearly, I said. She turned away, pacing toward the kitchen. We'll talk later. I watched her go, then looked at Cal. If anything happens to her, I said, nodding toward Mom. I'll know exactly when it happened and who was here. He swallowed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I said. I'm making it honest. The house settled into a tense stillness, all of us occupying the same space with different intentions. Jade moved around the kitchen, making noise on purpose. Cal hovered near the doorway, checking his phone. I stayed where I was, close to Mom, my presence a quiet obstacle. Whatever story they'd planned depended on my cooperation. And standing there watching them adjust, I could see it clearly now. The threat wasn't what they might do to me. It was what they were prepared to do to keep control. I let my shoulders drop, and my voice soften the way people do when they're done arguing and ready to compromise. It wasn't surrender, it was calibration. Jade watched for that kind of shift the moment she thought she'd won back control. Okay, I said. We'll do it your way tonight. Her eyes narrowed, measuring. Good. Cal relaxed first. That told me everything I needed to know. He was used to momentum, not resistance. Jade, on the other hand, didn't move. She studied my face, looking for cracks. I just need to understand what you want documented, I added. So I don't mess it up. She exhaled, satisfied. See? That's all I'm asking. She pulled the binder closer and flipped it open to the log, tapping the line with her finger. Time initials note that she remained unresponsive. I nodded, slow and agreeable. Got it. Inside, I was counting. Jade had switched from threats to instructions. That meant she believed compliance was back on the table. People make mistakes when they think the hard part is over. Cal busied himself at the kitchen counter, pretending not to listen. Jade stepped away to take a call, lowering her voice as she walked down the hallway. I leaned closer to Mom, close enough that my body blocked the view from the doorway. I'm going to play along, I whispered. But nothing touches you. Her eyes opened a fraction. They'll push, she whispered back. Let them, I said. I stood and moved to the guest room, closing the door just enough to muffle sound. I pulled my phone from the drawer and stepped into the closet, surrounded by hanging coats and the smell of cedar. I dialed the number Paige had given me earlier, the one she said to use if things escalated. She answered on the second ring. Paige, they're back, I said quietly. They're pressing for the dose. A pause. Are you safe? Yes, for now. I'm looping in APS, she said. Stay calm, don't confront. I won't, I said. But they're planning to increase it. Another pause, heavier this time. I'll flag it as imminent risk. I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket, then returned to the living room with my face set to neutral. Jade came back from the hallway, phone tucked away, her expression composed. Everything okay, she asked. Yeah, I said. Just needed water. She nodded and moved toward the medication tray. This time she didn't ask. She picked up the syringe and held it like it was a formality, not a choice. I'll do it, she said. I shifted closer to the bed, just enough to be in her line of sight. Let me, I said. I'm already here. She hesitated. Cal looked up. Jade smiled thinly. No, she said. I've got it. That's fine, I said. I'll log it. She glanced at the binder, then at me. Good. She approached the bed, efficient and practiced. Mom's breathing changed immediately, shallow and uneven. I watched Jade's hands, steady and sure. I watched the syringe angle toward the IV port. Hold on, I said, casual. What's the dosage tonight? Jade didn't look at me. Same as before. That's not what the schedule says, I said. Her hand paused. A fraction. Enough. Don't start, she said. I'm not, I said. I just don't want discrepancies. Cal stepped closer. You said you'd cooperate. I am, I said. This is cooperation. Jade turned, irritation flaring. You're stalling. 2 seconds, I said. What's the dosage? She rattled off a number. I wrote it down, slowly, deliberately. Then I looked up. That's higher. It's within range, she snapped. Within whose range, I asked. Her eyes flashed. Mine. I nodded. Okay. She turned back to the IV. I leaned in toward Mom, my hand resting lightly on the bed rail. I'm here, I murmured. Mom's eyes fluttered, a signal we'd practiced without words. I straightened and cleared my throat. Before you do that, I said I should tell you something. Jade didn't stop. Make it quick. The nurse filed a report, I said. This afternoon. Cal froze. Jade's hand stilled. The syringe hovered inches from the port. What report? Jade asked too fast. Concern, I said. About medication consistency. Cal's face drained of color. That's nothing, he said. They do that all the time. Sometimes, I said. This one was flagged. Jade's eyes bored into mine. You're lying, I shrugged. Call her. She didn't. She couldn't afford to. Her grip tightened on the syringe. You think this scares me? I think it should slow you down, I said. She looked at Mom, then back at me. You don't understand what you're risking. I do, I said. I also understand what you're risking. Silence stretched. The house seemed to lean in, listening. Jade's jaw worked, anger flickering across her face before she masked it. Fine, she said. We'll wait. For what? I asked. For things to settle, she said. We'll give it later. I nodded. I'll note that. She shot me a look, then set the syringe back on the tray with a little more force than necessary. Cal exhaled, relieved. Jade turned away, already pulling out her phone. This isn't over, she said, half to me, half to herself. I know, I said. I sat back down, positioning myself where I could see the tray, the IV, and the hallway all at once. My posture was relaxed. My attention wasn't. Mom's breathing eased slightly. I leaned closer. You did great, I whispered. Her fingers brushed mine, faint but deliberate. Minutes passed, then more. The tension didn't dissipate. It shifted like pressure building behind a door. Jade paced. Cal checked his phone. I stayed still, letting time do what it always does to people who think they're in control. The knock at the door came without warning, firm, official. Jade's head snapped up. Cal swore under his breath. I didn't move. I didn't look surprised. I simply stood and walked toward the door at a normal pace, my hand steady as I reached for the handle. Behind me, Jade hissed my name. I opened the door. I opened the door just enough to see 2 people standing on the porch. One wore a plain jacket with a badge clipped to his belt. The other held a tablet and a folder tucked against her chest. Both looked calm, which told me this wasn't a surprise visit. It was a response. Ma'am, the man said. I'm Detective Keaton with the County Sheriff's Office. We received a report of a possible medical emergency involving an at-risk adult. I stepped aside. You should come in. Behind me, I felt the room tighten. Jade moved fast, her voice switching on before her face did. There's no emergency, she said. My mother is terminal. She's receiving comfort care. The woman with the tablet met my eyes. Adult Protective Services, she said. We just need to take a look. That won't be necessary, Jade said. Everything here is being handled. Detective Keaton didn't argue. He took a step forward and looked past us into the living room at the equipment, the bed, the woman lying in it. Ma'am, he said to Jade, we're going to take a look. I closed the door behind them and walked ahead, keeping my pace normal. The living room lights felt brighter with more people in it. Mom's breathing was uneven again, shallow enough that I could hear it from across the room. APS moved first. Marjorie Ward, the woman said, approaching the bed. Can you hear me? Mom's eyelids fluttered. Not open, not closed. Enough. She's unresponsive, Jade said quickly. She's been that way for months. APS glanced at the monitor, then at the IV line. What medication is currently running? Jade hesitated. It's all in the binder. Detective Keaton nodded toward me. You're the one who called. I didn't call, I said. The nurse did. Jade turned on me. You went behind my back. I did what I was supposed to, I said. Cal stepped forward, hands up. This is a misunderstanding. Keaton didn't look at him. He looked at the syringe on the tray. What's that? Jade moved instinctively to block it. Medication. Has it been administered? He asked. No, I said. Jade snapped her head toward me. I told you, Keaton raised a hand. Ma'am, please don't interrupt. APS leaned closer to Mom. Marjorie, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand. Mom's fingers moved. Weak, deliberate. Jade froze. That's a response, APS said quietly. Jade laughed sharp and brittle. That's a reflex. Reflexes don't follow instructions, APS said. She looked at me. Has she been responsive to you? Yes, I said, intermittently. Jade spun on me. You're lying. Keaton stepped between us. Everyone take a breath. Cal's voice cracked. She's confused. Brain injuries do that. Keaton nodded. They can. He gestured to the syringe. What's the dosage? Jade answered too fast. Keaton looked at the label on the binder, then at the syringe again. That doesn't match. APS tapped her tablet. We also have concerns about documentation gaps. Jade's eyes flicked to the log. The blank line stared back. I can explain, she said. Keaton's tone stayed even. Please do. She needs consistency, Jade said. Any deviation causes agitation. Then why increase the dose? Keaton asked. Jade opened her mouth, then closed it. Cal spoke instead. Doctor's orders. Which doctor? Keaton asked. Silence. APS straightened. We're going to pause medication administration until this is reviewed. You can't do that, Jade said. This is my mother. That's exactly why we can, APS said. Mom's breathing hitched. I moved closer, my hand on the rail. I'm here, I said softly. Keaton watched me for a beat, then turned back to Jade. We're also seeing financial transfers that raise questions. Cal swore under his breath. Those are care expenses, Jade said. APS scrolled. Including a personal loan payoff. Cal took a step back. That's irrelevant. Keaton's gaze settled on him. It's relevant. Jade's voice hardened. This is harassment. Keaton nodded. If that's the case, your attorney can sort it out. APS addressed me. We're going to have EMS transport Marjorie to the hospital for evaluation. Jade shook her head. She doesn't need that. Mom's eyes opened. Just a sliver. Enough. She tried to speak and couldn't. APS saw it. Keaton saw it. That's enough, Keaton said. We're moving her. Cal lunged toward the tray. I stepped in front of him without touching him. Don't, I said. Jade grabbed the syringe. She needs this. Keaton's voice snapped. Put it down. Jade hesitated, eyes wild, calculating. For a second, I saw the choice flicker across her face. Then the front door burst open behind us as two paramedics came in with a stretcher. APS took the syringe from Jade's hand. Thank you. Jade let go like it burned. As EMS worked, Keaton pulled Jade and Cal aside. We need to ask you some questions. This is insane, Jade said. She's dying. Keaton didn't argue. He watched as Mom was carefully disconnected monitors, swapped hands, gentle and practiced. When they lifted her, her eyes opened wider than I'd seen all day. She looked straight at me. You did it, she whispered. I nodded. Not alone. Keaton returned his expression unreadable. Ma'am, he said to Jade, we're detaining you pending further investigation. Jade laughed again, too loud. For what? For suspected elder abuse, medical fraud, and financial exploitation, he said. And possibly more. Cal's shoulders sagged. You can't be serious. Keaton met his eyes. I am. As they cuffed Jade, she twisted to look at me. You think you've won, she said. I think she's alive, I said. They led her toward the door. Cal followed, pale and silent. The living room emptied in pieces. Equipment unplugged. Footsteps, voices fading. I stood where I was, my hands finally shaking now that there was room for it. APS paused beside me. You did the right thing. I watched the paramedics roll Mom toward the door. Her breathing was steadier already, oxygen hissing softly. I walked alongside until they reached the porch. As the stretcher was loaded, I caught one last look at the house behind us. It looked the same as it had when I arrived. Neat, quiet, ordinary. The difference was inside. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and quiet relief. The kind that settles in after something dangerous has passed, but hasn't fully sunk in yet. I stood by Mom's bed while a nurse adjusted monitors and checked numbers that finally made sense. Her breathing was steadier. Her color was better. Small improvements, but real ones. When the nurse stepped out, Mom opened her eyes and looked at me like she'd been waiting for the room to clear. You stayed, she said. I wasn't leaving, I told her. She nodded once. They didn't think you would. I know. A doctor came in shortly after, introduced himself, and spoke carefully, choosing words that didn't sugarcoat or dramatize. The sedatives in her system were strong, stronger than what had been documented. They would taper them down, monitor her closely run tests. He didn't say the word intent, but he didn't need to. His eyes said it for him. When he left, I sat down and let the edge of the bed creak under my weight. For the first time since I'd arrived in Hawthorne Ridge, I let myself feel tired. Not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from holding a line while people push on it from both sides. Later that afternoon, Detective Keaton found me in the hallway. He looked the same as he had the night before, calm, measured, but there was a finality in the way he spoke now. "We've separated your sister and her husband," he said. "There's enough here to proceed." "With what?" I asked. "Elder abuse, financial exploitation, medical fraud," he said. "The paper trail helps. So does the witness testimony. From the nurse," I said. "And from you," he said. "Your notes were thorough. That's my job," I said. Without thinking, he nodded. It showed. He handed me a card and walked away, already dialing someone else. The system kept moving, whether I watched it or not. Mom slept for a while after that. Real sleep, not the heavy, forced kind she'd been trapped in. I sat nearby and watched her chest rise and fall, letting the room stay quiet. When she woke again, she asked for water. Then she asked the question I'd known was coming. What did Jade say? I didn't answer right away. I chose my words carefully, not to protect Jade, but to keep the truth clean. "She said you were sick," I said. "She said she was helping." Mom closed her eyes. "She always said that," she said. "Helping. She won't be helping anymore," I said. Mom opened her eyes again, studying my face. "You didn't hesitate." "I did," I said. "Just not when it mattered." She smiled faintly. "You were always like that. Quiet until it counted." The days that followed blurred together in a way that felt unreal. Statements, forms, phone calls. I took leave longer than I'd planned, not because anyone asked me to, but because it was the right thing to do. My unit understood. They always did when I gave them the truth. Jade didn't ask to see me. Her lawyer did. I declined. Cal's name came up in conversations I wasn't part of anymore. Accounts were frozen, property transactions halted. Everything Jade had called necessary was suddenly very expensive to explain. Mom got stronger, slowly then noticeably. Her words came easier. Her eyes stayed open longer. She remembered more, not everything. Enough. One afternoon, as sunlight slid across the hospital floor, she looked at me and said, "You know she'll say you betrayed her." "I know," I said. "Does that bother you?" I thought about it, about childhood arguments, about the way Jade used to speak for both of us, about how easy it would have been to sign a line and let the story end the way she'd planned. "No," I said. "It bothers me that she thought I would." Mom reached for my hand. Her grip was still weak, but it was hers. "Blood isn't a contract," she said. "You taught me that." I snorted softly. "I learned it from you." When Mom was discharged to a rehab facility, I helped pack up the house. Not to restore it, to clear it. Papers went into labeled folders. Medications went into evidence bags. The binder that had started it all went into a box marked legal. The house looked different when the props were gone. Smaller, less convincing. On my last day in town, I stopped by the facility after morning PT, still in uniform, sweat damp and grounded. Mom sat by the window, sunlight warming her face. She looked like herself again. Older, thinner, but unmistakably present. "I heard about your promotion," she said. I smiled. "News travels fast. You earned it," she said. "Not just for what you do, for who you are." I shrugged. "Same thing." We sat there for a while, watching cars come and go, ordinary life uninterrupted. Before I left, she said, "You won't come back here, will you?" I said, "But I'll come back to you." That was enough. Weeks later, back on base, life slid into familiar patterns. Early mornings, long days, paperwork that never seemed to end. The difference was internal. The noise had quieted. The line I'd drawn held. I didn't talk about Jade unless asked. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it either. I told the truth and let it stand on its own. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the motor pool, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. One line. "You destroyed this family." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Families don't fall apart because someone tells the truth. They fall apart because someone was counting on a lie. That weekend, I drove to the rehab facility again. Mom was waiting, cardigan folded neatly on her lap. We walked the courtyard, slowly matching each other's pace. No rush, no agenda. "I'm thinking of selling the house," she said. "Good," I said. "Too many ghosts." She laughed softly. "I was thinking somewhere smaller. Somewhere quiet, I nodded. Quiet's underrated. As we sat down, she looked at me with a seriousness that made me pause. Thank you, she said. Not for saving me, for seeing me. I didn't have a smart answer for that, so I didn't force one. I sat there, the air warm and steady, and let the moment exist without explaining it away. Some stories end with forgiveness, some end with reconciliation. Ours ended with something simpler and harder to earn. Clarity. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.